The late morning sun poured through the sheer curtains of Helen Crawford's small but warmly decorated dining room. The table was set the way she always did on special days. White linen tablecloth, polished silverware, and a vase of fresh tulips right in the center. Mother's Day was always important to her. It wasn't about gifts or grand gestures. It was about the quiet joy of having her family close. She smoothed a small wrinkle in the tablecloth with her palm, glancing at the clock on the wall. 11:45 a.m. Jason and Amanda would be here any minute. She had roasted a small chicken, baked her signature lemon pie, and made sure the house smelled of something comforting. When she heard the knock at the door, Helen smiled instinctively. She opened it to find her son Jason, tall and sharply dressed as always, standing beside his wife Amanda, whose makeup was flawless and hair perfectly curled. Helen hugged them both, feeling the familiar warmth. But she also noticed something else. There were no flowers, no card, no small wrapped gift. Not that she needed them. Helen wasn't that kind of mother. But still, on Mother's Day, it was hard not to notice when the hands you'd once held through scraped knees and sleepless nights came empty. "Smells amazing in here," Jason said, stepping inside. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," Amanda added, smiling in a way Helen couldn't quite read. They sat down to eat, the conversation light at first. Amanda talked about a friend's wedding. Jason talked about work, his boss, and the pressure of saving for a new house. Helen listened, offering nods and the occasional, "That sounds exciting," as she served food onto their plates. Halfway through the meal, the tone shifted. Jason set his fork down and looked at her with a measured expression. "Mom," he began slowly, "you don't really drive much anymore, do you?" Helen blinked. "Not as much as I used to." "Why?" Amanda leaned forward, her smile widening. "We were talking, and we think maybe it makes sense for us to take your car. We could sell it and put the money toward our house down payment. You'd barely miss it." The way she said it, as if this were a thoughtful suggestion, even a favor, made something twist inside Helen's chest. She had worked for that car, paid it off herself, kept it clean, maintained, and insured. It wasn't just transportation, it was independence. Still, she didn't let her face betray anything. She picked up her teacup, took a slow sip, and set it back down. "That's an idea," she said lightly. Jason, mistaking her calm for agreement, brightened. "It really would help us out, Mom. And you could always call a taxi if you needed to go somewhere." Amanda nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. And honestly, it's just sitting there most of the time. We'd be putting it to good use." Helen forced a small smile, though her mind was moving quickly. This wasn't the first time they'd hinted at taking something of hers. A few months ago, Amanda had casually suggested that Helen should pass down her antique dining set since she never had big dinner parties anymore. Before that, Jason had asked if she'd consider loaning them a large sum from her savings, promising it would be, just until they got on their feet. She had said no both times, but this time she saw an opportunity. "You know what?" she said, leaning back slightly in her chair. "If you think that's what's best, then okay." Jason and Amanda exchanged a quick, almost smug glance. Amanda reached for another slice of pie, clearly pleased. Jason relaxed back into his seat, satisfied that the conversation had gone their way. Helen's smile didn't reach her eyes. Inside, she felt the sting of their presumption, coming to her house on Mother's Day of all days, not to celebrate her, but to see what they could take. But she also felt something else, resolve. She had raised Jason to be independent, to work hard for what he wanted. Somewhere along the line, he'd started thinking that family meant she was a never-ending resource. Maybe he thought her quiet nature meant she wouldn't push back. But she would, just not in the way he expected. For the rest of the lunch, Helen kept the conversation pleasant. They talked about neighborhood news, the weather, and Amanda's upcoming work project. No more mention of the car. Jason and Amanda left an hour later, thanking her for the meal and hugging her at the door. As Helen closed it behind them, her smile faded. She walked to the window and watched them walk down the driveway to their own car, chatting casually, oblivious to the plan already forming in her mind. She turned, walked into her small home office, and opened the drawer where she kept her car's title and maintenance records. She ran her fingers over the smooth envelope before pulling it out and setting it on the desk. Her eyes moved to the phone on the corner. She knew exactly who to call, Frank Lawson, an old friend who owned a used car dealership in town. Someone she trusted. Someone who could help her make sure that when Jason and Amanda tried to take her car, they'd find out it was no longer hers to give. She picked up the phone, her voice calm but certain as she dialed. Frank, it's Helen. I need your help with something, and I need it done fast. The phone barely rang twice before Frank Lawson's familiar, gravelly voice came through the line. Helen, well, this is a surprise. Happy Mother's Day, he said warmly. Helen smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Thank you, Frank. I'm sorry to call out of the blue, but I need your help with something. Name it. It's about my car, she said simply. There was a brief pause, then the sound of a chair creaking on his end. All right, what about it? Helen hesitated for only a second before telling him exactly what had happened over lunch, how Jason and Amanda had, in her words, gift-wrapped a demand and presented it as if they were doing her a favor. Frank chuckled, but there was an edge to it. Your son's got nerve, I'll give him that. So, what do you want to do? I want to make sure that when they try to sell it, Helen said slowly, they find out it's not mine anymore. She could almost hear Frank's grin through the phone. I like the sound of that. The next morning, Helen took the car out for a drive. It was a crisp, clear day, and the spring air carried the faint scent of lilacs from the yards she passed. She drove slowly, savoring every familiar hum of the engine, every turn of the wheel. She wasn't giving it up because she wanted to. She was giving it up because it was the only way to keep it out of hands that didn't respect it. When she pulled into Frank's dealership lot, the morning sun glinted off rows of polished hoods. Frank came out from his office, wiping his hands on a rag, his silver hair catching the light. Still a beauty, he said, walking around the car like a jeweler appraising a diamond. Helen handed him the folder with the title and maintenance records. I don't want you to sell it right away. Just keep it here, off the market, until I tell you otherwise. Frank raised an eyebrow. This is more than just a transfer, isn't it? Helen's lips curved into the faintest smile. Let's just say I'm making a point. They stepped into his office, the air smelling faintly of coffee and leather. It took less than 20 minutes to sign the paperwork. Helen insisted on selling it for a token amount, $1, so there'd be no question of ownership. Frank, ever the friend, insisted she take a proper bill of sale to make it airtight. When they were done, she slid the new paperwork into her bag. The car was no longer hers on paper, and no longer accessible to Jason or Amanda in any way. That night, Helen sat at her kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, looking out the window at her now empty driveway. She felt a strange mix of loss and satisfaction. The car had been a piece of her independence, but so was standing up for herself. In her mind, she could already picture it. Jason and Amanda walking into a dealership, confidently giving her name, expecting the sale to go smoothly. And then, the moment their faces would change when the dealer told them they had no right to sell it. She set her cup down, a faint smile tugging at her lips. 2 days later, she got her first sign that the plan was moving toward that moment. Jason called in the afternoon, his tone cheerful and casual. Hey, Mom. Just checking in, he said. Helen leaned back in her chair. That's nice of you. How's the week going? Oh, busy. Amanda and I were talking. Maybe we'll swing by the dealership later this week, see what kind of price we can get for the car. That sounds interesting, Helen replied evenly, giving nothing away. Jason chuckled. Don't worry, we'll get a good deal. I'll make sure you're proud of how we handle it. She murmured something polite and ended the call. As she set the phone down, she couldn't help but notice how easy his confidence came when he thought everything was under his control. That evening, she called Frank again to make sure the paperwork was filed, logged, and airtight. It's all done, he assured her. If anyone tries to list that car as theirs, the system will throw a red flag. You're covered. Helen thanked him and hung up. She wasn't just covered, she was ready. The morning of the third day, Helen woke up to the smell of rain. Drops tapped against her window as she sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee. She wondered if today would be the day they tried to sell it. She didn't have to wait long. By mid-afternoon, her phone buzzed. It was Jason. She didn't answer right away. Let it ring twice before picking up. Mom, he said, his voice already tinged with frustration. What's going on with the car? The dealership says it's not in your name anymore. Helen's tone was calm, almost conversational. That's right. It's not. What do you mean? You said we could. I said if you thought that's what's best, then okay, she interrupted smoothly. And I decided what was best was giving it to someone who actually needed it. From the background, Amanda's voice rose sharply. Are you serious? That's not fair. Helen ignored her. I'm sure you'll figure something else out. And with that, she ended the call. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the last she'd hear from them. Because she also knew that what Frank had told her about the dealership systems, about how ownership disputes get flagged, meant the next call wouldn't just be angry. It would be desperate. And she was ready for that too. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the streets washed clean, the air smelling faintly of wet pavement and spring flowers. Helen sat at her kitchen table, the same seat where she had listened to Jason's cheerful, just checking in call days earlier. This time, she wasn't wondering if the moment would come. She knew it was only a matter of time. She stirred a spoon slowly through her coffee, glancing at the clock. 9:12 a.m. Jason was not the type to waste time when he thought there was money to be made. If he and Amanda were going to the dealership, it would be today. By late morning, her phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up, Jason Crawford. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she let it ring until it was just about to go to voicemail, then picked up, her voice calm and neutral. "Hello. Mom." His voice was sharp, irritated. "What's going on with the car? We're at the dealership, and they're saying it's not in your name anymore." Helen leaned back in her chair, eyes on the window as the sunlight broke through the clouds. "That's correct. It's not." "What do you mean it's not?" "You said." "I said if you thought that was best, then okay," she interrupted gently. "And I decided what was best was giving it to someone who actually needed it." There was a short, stunned silence on the line. Then Amanda's voice came in, sharper, louder, clearly not realizing she was close enough for Helen to hear. "Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. She can't just." Helen spoke over her, her voice steady. "I can, Amanda." "And I did." Jason let out a humorless laugh, but it sounded more like disbelief than amusement. "You could have told us. And you could have been honest with me," Helen replied. "You came here on Mother's Day, not to spend time with me, but to take from me. That's not how family works." She could almost see Jason's face in her mind. That slight twitch in his jaw he got when he wasn't getting his way. At the dealership, Jason stood with his phone pressed to his ear, Amanda pacing behind him, arms crossed, her high heels clicking sharply against the tile floor. The sales manager stood nearby, watching the scene with that polite, careful expression that people in customer service wear when things are going south. "Sir," the manager said when Jason ended the call, "as I told you, the vehicle isn't yours to sell. It's not in your name, and it hasn't been for days. In fact, the system flagged this as a potential ownership dispute. If you try to proceed, it could be considered attempted fraud." Amanda's head snapped toward the man. "Fraud? We're family. That was his mother's car." The manager's voice stayed polite but firm. "Ma'am, regardless of family relations, the only person who can sell this car is the legal owner. And that's not you or your husband." Jason felt the heat rise in his face. Around them, the hum of normal dealership life continued. A couple across the room signing papers for a new SUV, a salesman offering coffee to a waiting customer. But in their little corner, it felt like the walls were closing in. Amanda grabbed his arm. "We need to leave. Now." Back at home, Helen placed her phone on the table and poured herself another cup of coffee. She didn't need to hear every detail to know how the scene at the dealership had played out. She could picture it. Amanda's indignation, Jason's embarrassment, the awkward stares from strangers nearby. She also knew something else. This wasn't over. Frank had warned her that dealership systems didn't just note ownership disputes. They flagged them in a way that could trigger further checks. And if Jason or Amanda had tried to push the sale, even after being told they weren't the owners, that flag might have already gone from a simple warning to something more official. That evening, her phone lit up again. Jason this time didn't sound angry. He sounded unsettled. "Mom, we need to talk." Helen kept her tone light. "We are talking." He hesitated. "The dealership said, the way this looks, it could get us into trouble. Like legal trouble. They said if the owner reports it, it's fraud." Helen let a pause stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. "And why would the owner do that, Jason?" Another pause. "You wouldn't." She didn't answer that directly. Instead, she said, "Actions have consequences. You wanted the car because you thought it was easy to take. Now you're learning it's not so easy." Later that night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Helen stood by the window, the soft glow of a lamp casting warm light around the room. She thought about the boy she had raised, the one who used to draw her cards on Mother's Day, who once spent his allowance buying her a cheap but heartfelt necklace. Somewhere along the way, that boy had grown into a man who thought love could be measured in what he could take rather than what he could give. And she decided, if this dealership warning turned into something more, she wouldn't rush to protect him from it. Not this time. For now, she would wait. The next chapter wasn't hers to write. It would be written by Jason and Amanda's own actions. And she had a feeling they weren't done making mistakes. It was 2 days after the scene at the dealership. The morning air was still and heavy, the kind that makes the world feel slower than usual. Helen Crawford sat in her favorite armchair by the window, reading the morning paper. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of the old wood floor and the ticking of the clock above the mantel. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her. The caller ID read Jason Crawford. She didn't rush to answer. Instead, she folded the paper neatly, set it down, and let the phone ring twice before picking it up. Hello. Jason's voice came through, but it wasn't his usual confident tone. It was tight, almost trembling. Mom, we have a problem. Helen leaned back in her chair. Oh, what kind of problem? He hesitated. The police called. She stayed silent, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. They said, Jason continued, the dealership filed a report about us trying to sell a car that wasn't ours. They want us to come in and give a statement. They made it sound serious. Helen's voice was calm. Well, Jason, it is serious. Selling property that doesn't belong to you? That's fraud. From somewhere close to him, Amanda's voice broke in, sharp, defensive. It's not fraud. It was your car. We're family. Helen's tone didn't change. No, Amanda. It was my car. Until I signed it over. After that, it wasn't mine anymore, and it was never yours. You tried to sell something you had no legal right to. There was a pause, and Helen could almost hear them exchanging frantic looks. Mom, Jason said finally, you're not going to. I mean, you wouldn't let them charge us, right? You can explain to them it was just a misunderstanding. Helen's eyes drifted to the window, watching a sparrow hop along the fence. And what exactly would I say, Jason? That my son and his wife showed up on Mother's Day to take my car, tried to sell it behind my back, and got caught? I don't think that sounds like a misunderstanding. On the other end, Jason exhaled shakily. This could mess everything up for us, the house, my job. Helen cut in. Maybe it should. Maybe you need to understand that actions have consequences, even for you. Especially for you. Amanda's voice rose again. So you're just going to let this happen? Let us get in trouble. Helen's voice softened, but it wasn't out of pity, it was out of resolve. I'm going to let the truth happen, Amanda. The truth is, you both thought you could take from me without asking, without respecting me. And you thought I'd just go along with it because I'm your mother, because I've always helped before. But I'm done being taken for granted. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Jason's voice returned, lower now. What do you want from us? Helen thought about that. She could have asked for an apology, but apologies were cheap when they came only after someone was caught. She could have asked for them to never speak to her again, but she wasn't ready to cut her son out of her life completely. I want you to show me, she said finally. Not with words, with actions. I want you to work for what you have, to respect what's yours and what isn't. And until I see that, I won't lift a finger to make this easier for you. 2 days later, Helen got an update from Frank Lawson, her friend at the dealership. Your son and his wife were here again, Frank said over the phone. This time to apologize, to us, not to you, I'm guessing. They signed some paperwork saying they wouldn't try to claim the car again. We closed the matter on our end, but the police might still want to talk to them. Helen thanked him. She wasn't interested in whether Jason and Amanda faced a slap on the wrist or a full investigation. That wasn't her fight anymore. What mattered was that they had been made to face a situation they couldn't smooth over with charm or excuses. A week later, Jason showed up at her door alone. When she opened it, she saw the tired lines on his face, the way his shoulders sagged. He held no flowers, no gifts, just his hands in his jacket pockets. Can I come in? He asked quietly. Helen stepped aside. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he and Amanda had once made their suggestion about the car. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Jason looked down at his hands. I'm sorry, Mom. I thought you'd always just help me. I didn't think about how it would feel for you. That was wrong. Helen studied him for a moment. His voice was steady, without the defensive edge she'd grown used to. It was wrong, she agreed. But admitting it is a start. He nodded. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I get it now. Helen gave a small smile. Good. Let's hope you keep getting it. That night, after Jason left, Helen stood by her window with a cup of tea, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. She thought about how close she'd come to simply giving in, to letting them take what they wanted for the sake of keeping the peace. But peace built on being taken advantage of wasn't peace at all. The car was gone, but something more important had been returned to her. The knowledge that she could still stand her ground, no matter who was on the other side of the table. And somewhere, she hoped, Jason had started to learn the same lesson.